So she is representing, hopefully, all graphologists around the world. Okay? So we are very fortunate to have Bernadette here. She's a lecturer at the Academy. She has written the book, The International Manual of Graphology, which a number of you know about. She's also brilliant, there you are, you see. She also is an examiner for the Academy. So we are very fortunate to have you here, Bernadette. Thank you for coming to speak to us.
Thank you. Well, first of all, good morning, and it's a pleasure to be here. Adam says that there's lots of you this morning, so I'm flattered. But getting back to this, as you can see, we're going to be talking about defence mechanisms. I'm not here to necessarily teach you. I mean, in an hour, teaching defence mechanisms is impossible. But my sole aim, is to prompt you to always remember them when you're writing your reports. I know years ago I would put them on my worksheet, I'd acknowledge them, and then probably, if I'm honest, I'd forget all about them, or forget a lot about them when I was putting my report together. So some years ago I kind of thought this has to be looked into and rectified. So, and I was told, I mean, we were all taught at the Academy that graphology cannot describe the person's behaviour. Yet in professional practice, we're called to do exactly that. Otherwise, we're not really of much practical use to our clients. We can't, go exposing the inner souls of individuals. So, but as graphologists, we know that graphology certainly reveals the inner person. And, we're privileged to have that. But writers don't reveal their inner selves in everyday reality. We have to dig a lot deeper to find the hidden defence mechanisms which have surprisingly significant impact on behaviour itself. Yes, I'm going to look at some samples, obviously, that's what you're going to want to see, and I'm going to try and link some of them to Jung's inferior function, because it's where we're most primitive and uncontrolled that defences may mostly arise or be needed or be not working so well. Oh, and again, obviously, the main function may be where we have the better adapted defences. So, we all know that while handwriting behaves in a certain way on the page, this doesn't mean it behaves, that the writer behaves that way in reality. Oh, that it were that simple. Yet knowing this, I still get drawn in by the initial image on the page. And I used to get more drawn in years ago, because that's the whole point of the general impression. Anyway, for example, if I remember, I initially thought this was a cautious, shy writer, when in fact she's not. I initially thought of this man years ago. I've known him forever, and years ago, as a young graphologist, the science for graphology didn't really fit in my understanding. I saw this and thought he's an expressive man, and he's not. He's a quiet man. So we're going to come back and look at him. It's the second page, so you see the amplified signature there. And I initially imagined that this was a rather laid-back and relaxed woman, when in fact she's really very rigorous and meticulous. So, these are the honest mistakes I know I've made. I have made horrible mistakes. Oh God, this is going on camera. But I know I would have done this years ago, because we learn on this, and there's so much to learn, and we never stop learning, and that's the way it is. People are very complex, so that's the trick, that's the way it is. So we'll crack on. But mistakes like this made me realise that I needed to look at what was, to really pay proper respect to the effective defence mechanisms in behaviour. We know what's going on in the deep level of the individual, but people don't show that in behaviour. And I wasn't satisfied to be told that graphology doesn't give us behaviour, because I wanted to see that it could do, and we've learned that it Quickly we'll whiz through this, but it's just worth remembering that when Sigmund and Anna Freud, they were both clinical psychoanalysts, and when they first propounded the concepts of defence mechanisms, it was in the late 19th, early 20th century, and they themselves were very much influenced by their own origins, being brought up in a very bourgeoisie lifestyle in Vienna. It's probably no surprise that their patients were hysterical, paranoid, obsessional. I mean, on the surface it was a very repressed time, and you might think times have changed, but perhaps our insecurities haven't necessarily changed. So, we're not living in the same age. So we're carrying on, sorry. Yes, the point is now that the classical Freudian defence mechanisms have become completely mingled with modern cognitive psychology, and today there really is absolutely no consensus on the number of defence mechanisms. Each theorist has brought something new: Klein, Sullivan, Winnicott, Bowlby, Erickson, and of course there's all those immediate post-Freudian ones of Adler, Fromm, and Horns, and they all brought something new, changed the name, came at it with a slightly different angle. And depending on the current author these days, especially in travel the net, you can see that defence mechanisms can range anywhere from numbering 8 to 45. Don't ask me what the 45 are, I don't know. But Freudian concepts pretty much do remain respected precepts of psychoanalysis today, which is good for us. Yes, and as pathologists, we've already studied Freud's defence mechanisms, but we'll quickly remember that they arise when we feel threatened and overwhelmed by anxiety. They are unconscious biopsychological reflexes, and as such, completely involuntary. They are natural and ongoing within us to help us adapt to life, the reality principle. They occur, like we know from our theory, they occur when id impulses conflict with each other, with the ego or the superego, or with threats perceived in external reality. Ultimately, the aim of all defence mechanisms is to maintain a healthy self-esteem. And quickly looking at them, the hidden defences, our defences, we can reduce anxiety by rational means, intellectualisation, denying the danger, we know as denial, rationalisation, repression, externalising the danger, projection and displacement, hiding or masking it, isolation, reaction formation, standing still if we're totally fixated, or escaping, flight, fantasy, or retreating from danger, regression, or finding a fulfilling and successful solution, deemed to be sublimation, the best one of all. But I would say that displacement is the prequel to sublimation. It's the sort of learning step by step that leads us to the sublimation. The ego needs defence mechanisms, and a blend of them is a positive thing. It's better than having just one, let's say, unless that one is just sublimation, of course. So like psychological shields or painkillers, their use can be, as we all probably know, they can be healthy or not. They can be used well or abused. It really does depend on their healthy, neurotic or psychotic use. They're not supposed to restrict the personality, but nor should they be so weak that they leave us vulnerable to all our dangerously savage instincts. Apparently that's the greatest fear of all for human beings, that they're overtaken by our primitive instincts. So we know that the defence mechanisms develop in accordance with different stages of life. You know this, oral, anal, phallic, genital stage. But it would be wrong to think that they get fixed in one time. We move between them, unless, of course, there is some total fixation. So that they are there and we move between and betwixt them. Regression can occur at any time in life, and it it can be very, very helpful. We all regress sometimes if we're very tired or very stressed. You might, I don't know, rush for the old bar of chocolate or have a duvet day or whatever. Regression is not a bad thing. Children use it, adults use it. And especially as we approach old age, we will use regression because having defence mechanisms is very energy consuming. So all the things we're repressing and putting down right now in our adult lives, that's why old age, people can become suddenly rather less conventional, more cantankerous, more aggressive. It's fun, it's something to look forward to. So, using our defences, it takes energy. So we need, therefore, to see which development phase is most evident in the handwriting, as you know, to gauge which associated defences are dominantly used and whether their use is well adapted or not. I mean, this, is simple, but I'm just getting you into the room with me, taking you on the journey. So oral defence mechanisms, introjection, where the ego from infancy internalises the qualities of the external world, parents, all experience comes in, is eaten in, the child absorbs, and as adults too, it's a continuing defence mechanism. Projection, where we literally spit out anything that we don't accept in ourselves, but it's not just, the bad feelings or bad thoughts, we also project fantasies, aspects of our own inner lives that we either can't accept or don't recognise as yet. Denial, I love denial. It's an unconscious block on disturbing aspects of external reality from perception. It leads to a bit of a Pollyanna-type behaviour sometimes, but I'd rather that than depression. No, but I'm joking now. I just think that denial is this. Can be not psychotic denial, clearly, but a lot of people stick their head in the sand over a lot of things, and it's not at all psychotic. The anal defences, undoing, or used to be called retroactive annulment, a mechanism to reduce anxiety from past thoughts or behaviours by attempts to cancel them out through atoning thoughts or behaviours in order to reverse them. Freud and most psychologists, psychoanalysts see this most keenly in obsessive people. I see it too in compulsive. Obsession and compulsion look different in handwritings. We know this. Obsession, all terribly blocked in and rigid and black. But compulsion, which is a very similar thing, operating on a slightly different level, where the writing is driven and so on, undoing can occur there. And undoing, it's an odd thing, but undoing can even occur when someone's performing very well, they're at a meeting doing everything very well, and suddenly they, spill coffee over the boss, or they arrive at something and they've forgotten their notes. They're doing well, and then they sabotage themselves, because their superego has given them a guilt trip on being 100% successful. And I'm sure this is what goes on with neurotic people. That we know that neurotic people unwittingly create self-sabotage in their lives, and I think undoing is one of the things that's behind it. But that's not for today. I'm not trying to teach. But reaction formation and anxiety-producing emotions are converted. They're flipped literally over by the exaggeration of the very opposite tendency. And again, reaction formation has different levels. It can be very extreme, or it can be quite slight. And it is used. I see it. I'm aware of its use, quite common use. Isolation, the separation, bracketing of emotion from a memory. It's not, putting myself in a cupboard or in a room. It's the emotion from a memory or an action or event, so that it can be expressed without awareness of any of the feelings connected with it. Quickly, rationalization, giving a logical justification, usually to alleviate guilt, for a decision or an act that's arrived at through unconscious, concealed motivation. So it can be from denial, fantasy, any of the other defences that are occurring. Intellectualization, a mechanism which treats emotions in only rational, general terms. Feelings then become conceptualized and neutralized through thinking about feeling, which a lot of us do. Phallic